welcome back to Online PTE. By now you all know my name. I'm Jasmine. Today we are going to be looking at Module 4, Listening, Task 1, Summarize the Spoken Text. Have you downloaded your worksheets and your lecture notes? You're all ready? Okay, let's get started. So, first of all, let's see what is Summarize a Spoken Text in PTE Listening. Summarize a Spoken Text is the first part of your listening test in PTE exam, and it does measure your listening and your writing, because you will listen to a lecture and then you need to write a summary of the lecture. So it measures both the skills, reading, listening, and writing, integrated, as we say. And the lecture time for Summarize a Spoken Text is like 60 seconds to 90 seconds. The minimum time is 60 and the maximum is 90, which is 1.5 minutes. And you may have 2 to 3 Summarize a Spoken Texts in your PTE exam. For each, you will have 10 minutes. Let's say, for example, if you have 3 Summarize a Spoken Texts, you will have 30 minutes for this section. And if you have 2, you will have 20 minutes. So 10 minutes is for listening to the lecture and producing a written paragraph. Now, with these 10 minutes, we should know that it's very important to have a proper planning for the time, because you definitely need to get yourself some time to edit your work. As you can see on the left side of the board, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas of marking in Summarize the Spoken Text, and you definitely need to get yourself some time to check form, grammar, vocabulary, and of course spelling. Okay, so your Summarize the Spoken Text, your paragraph will be judged and will be measured according to these 5 areas. Content of the summary or content of your produced summary means how much you could get from the lecture. For example, if the lecture mentions 3 key points, were you able to get 3 key points and just some supporting ideas? Not all of them, because the paragraph that you are writing is quite short, so you cannot write everything. So content means how much you could get from the lecture. So some key points plus some supporting ideas. Of course, you cannot include all examples and all details, because you have only 50 to 70 words for the summary. Form of your presentation, this is quite important. Let's take a look at layout of the response. Layout of the response will help you get this part. So, the summary that you write must be minimum 50 to maximum 70 words. It means you shouldn't write less than 50 words and more than 70 words. Otherwise, this part will be marked down. Okay, so your written paragraph must be anything from 50 to 70 words, and then it must be a paragraph, not bullet points. Sometimes I notice that a student just write bullet points, like for example, this second important point made by the lecturer was that third important. It doesn't work like this. It must be a paragraph, means integrated piece of writing, coherent piece of writing. And then for the form of your presentation, you need to pay attention to capitalization and punctuation as well, because if you write your summary in capital letter, the form will be 0. Okay, so you should know that all these 5 areas are marked from 2 to 0. 2, 1 and 0. So the maximum mark given to each section is 2, the minimum is 0, which means a perfect summarized spoken text will get 10 points in PTE exam. Okay, so if your summary is less than 50 words and more than 70 words, your score for the form will not be 2. It's either 1 or 0, depending how many words you wrote less or more. If you write in bullet points, again, the form will go down to 0. If you write everything in capital letter, it goes down to 0. And if you write very short sentences, it goes down to 0. So you should know that you must use sentence structure, compound sentences, complex sentences, to improve your score in form, and of course in grammar as well. Okay, so this is all about form. Your summary must be 50 to 70 words, not in capital letters, And punctuation is important. You can't write everything in bullet points, and of course not very short sentences. The next area of marking for summarized spoken text is grammar. As it happens in all components of the test, grammar is a big part of the exam, and grammar is very important. If you produce a summary without any grammar error, so it is 2, but if you show like some minor grammar errors, it is 1. But if the grammar errors are really impeding the communication, it is 0. It means significant grammar errors will mark it down to 0. Vocabulary is also very important. Just know that vocabulary and spelling are 2 different areas of marking. Vocabulary means correct word choice. Did you choose proper words to convey the message? Did you choose proper word to write down your paragraph and your summary? And if all words are correct, then it is 2. If you have some minor like errors, it is 1. But if there is a problem with communication and you cannot actually your paragraph cannot communicate properly, it is 0, which means significant vocabulary errors. And then we have a spelling. You should know that a spelling is like a very important part of PTE tests in writing, in listening. Spelling is quite important because these days I can see that many of our students make a spelling mistakes. One possible reason could be because, you know, we all have this autocorrection facility in our devices. So I would always recommend to turn off your autocorrection in your devices and try to rely on your spelling knowledge to check the spelling. Because, for example, for a short test like this, if all the words are spelled correctly, you will get 2. If you have 1 spelling mistake, it is 1. If you have more than 1, it is 0. The same area is effective for essay as well, and for many other parts of the test. So pay attention to spelling, please. Okay, thank you. Now, we are going to look at some tips, techniques, and strategies which help you to get the test done easily and to get it done faster as well. The first and the most important technique is, when you listen to the lecture, you need to pay attention to the key idea, to the key point of the lecture. Just know that each lecture, the lecture is quite short, it's 60 seconds to 90 seconds. So each lecture has one key idea. Let's say, for example, the key idea of the lecture is happiness. And within this key idea, you will be given some details, okay? So the key point of the lecture is 100% important. And of course, you need to refer to just some supporting details to produce a well-structured summary. And the other important thing which you need, the other important tip that you need for this part is note-taking. Again, with note-taking, there are 2 different categories of learners. The first group, you know, they can take note and they can listen and concentrate at the same time. The second category of learners or candidates, they can't take note. If they take note, they lose their concentration, but they can stay focused and they can concentrate from the beginning to the end. I would suggest try both approaches and see which one works for you. If, for example, you can take note and listen at the same time, so go for it, this is perfect. And if you think that no, note taking will kind of disturb your concentration, so stop taking notes and just try to concentrate. Either is fine. If you can, for example, do note taking, do that one. Otherwise, just go for the second approach. But if you are going to take note, just know that you should take notes as codes and abbreviations. You cannot write down the whole word because you don't have time to do that. And with note taking, take note of like key and important ideas, like for example, numbers, years, and name of people is not really important, but places, yes, sometimes they're very important. It really depends on the lecture as well. But let's say, for example, the lecture is explaining 3 steps of something, firstly, secondly, thirdly. So your produced summary must include all these 3 steps. And it really depends on the content of the lecture. Okay, thank you. And the other important part of your summarized spoken text and the summary is, again, time planning. Please make sure you give yourself 2 minutes at the end to check your work. I would say try to finish everything in 8 minutes and get yourself 2 minutes for checking and editing, because if you make any like grammatical mistake or vocabulary or spelling, you would know that. And the other thing, number of words. At the same time, you must pay attention to the word count. So you should know that it's anything between 50 to 70 words. Okay? Thank you. Now, I would like to do a practice test with you right now. Are you ready? Yes, pen and paper ready? Okay, so I will read a lecture for you and you will listen. Try to take note if you're happy with note taking, and then I'm going to explain like how many points have been mentioned in the lecture and how can we summarize them together. Are you ready? Let's go for it. Just focus on note taking or just focus on your lecture. In the last 50 years, there has been no apparent increase in personal happiness in Western nations, despite steadily growing economies. In both Europe and the USA, surveys have found no greater level of happiness since the 1950s, which seems strange since wealthier people generally claim to be happier than poorer people. In America, for example, more than a third of the richest group said they were very happy, while only half this number of the poorest made the same claim. Although it would be logical to expect that rising national wealth would lead to greater national happiness, this has not happened. Individually, more money does seem to increase happiness, but when everyone gets richer, no one appears to feel better. Economists have recently paid more attention to studying happiness instead of the more traditional GDP per person. One suggestion has been that people rapidly get used to improvements and therefore devalue them. Central heating is a good example. Whereas 30 years ago it was a luxury item, today it is a standard in nearly every home. How did you go? Did you take notes or you were just listening? How many points were made in the lecture? What was the main idea of the lecture? Yes, the main idea of the lecture was happiness. And did the lecture have any context? Yes, Western countries, Western nations. And as an example, the lecturer referred to USA. So I would like to go back to this lecture and the points made in the lecture. The first point made in the lecture was the speaker or the lecturer was arguing that although Western nations have expanded since the 1950s, there has been no parallel growth in happiness. So this was the first point, and the lecturer put it like this: in the last 50 years, there has been no apparent increase in personal happiness in Western nations, despite steadily growing economies. Look, this is the main point, and now listen again to the supporting detail. In both Europe and the USA, surveys have found no greater level of happiness since the 1950s. The lecturer is supporting the main idea by bringing example, which seems strange since wealthier people generally claim to be happier than poorer people. So we just need the first part of this lecture, the first sentence of this part to reflect in our summary. So how can we say that? The speaker argues that although Western economies have expanded since the 1950s, there has been no parallel growth in happiness. So we made the first sentence, and the rest was just supporting idea. Okay, I would like to leave the second and the third part to you. Listen to the lecture, listen to the second part one more time, and try to explain and try to go through the second part as we went here. We didn't need the detail, we just needed the main idea. Listen again. In America, for example, more than a third of the richest group said they were very happy, while only half this number of the poorest made the same claim. Although it would be logical to expect that rising national wealth would lead to greater national happiness. This has not happened. Individually, more money does seem to increase happiness, but when everyone gets richer, no one appears to feel better. So, what was the main point of this part of the lecture? Yes, the research has shown that rich people generally say they are happier than poor people, but it also appears that although individuals may become happier, the society as a whole does not really become happy. And that was the second most important point made in the lecture. How about the third part? Listen to the third part again. Economists have recently paid more attention to studying happiness instead of the more traditional GDP per person. Now here we are actually getting closer to a reason. So why this is the case? Why people are not really happy these days in Western societies, in rich nations? Now we are getting to the point. One suggestion has been that people rapidly get used to improvements and therefore devalue them. Central heating is a good example. Whereas 30 years ago it was a luxury item, today it is a standard in nearly every home. So one possible suggestion that people are not generally happy these days is that people soon become accustomed to improvements and do not really appreciate them. And this affects the concept of happiness in their lives. So 3 paragraphs or 3 parts in the lecture with 3 points. You don't need the details to support it. Okay? So as always, just remember, consistency, persistency are the key to your success. Please remember to do your homework and to submit your homeworks. Your teachers are always waiting for you. Thank you. Bye for now.